And welcome everyone to God's Views on Political News. It's so great to have you here today. Everybody's joining us now, and just wanted to say hello to you coming in. Feel free to comment and ask any questions. And Bill, how are you today?
I'm doing okay. I'm all right. I'm in a pretty good mood considering the ragweed that's in the air, but I'm doing all right.
We don't have ragweed here, so I can't be,
Yeah, I know, but
too
you don't have
sympathetic.
freedom either, so I'll take the ragweed.
What's your definition of freedom? That's saying hello to Robin is here, Linda's here, Bethany Cloud is here. Good to see everybody. Darlene Dine is here, and it's
And the
good to have everybody
backdrop is
back.
not here.
And the backdrop is
It's
not
not
here.
there.
We've got to have something because that's it has to make the show. We got to do something a little bit different, Bill. Every
Yeah,
time.
well, whatever. Okay. Anyway, who else is here?
Carmen is here. Chris is here. Anybody, if you do start having problems at all on Periscope, just go over to YouTube. It's
Okay.
always good on YouTube. So just letting you know, Marlene's here.
Brandon's
Good to
here
see
too.
Marlene. Brandon's here. Dawn is here. Brandon has a microphone. I mean, I don't
That's
know.
scary.
That's scary. I don't know who did that,
Danger,
but we
danger,
gotta.
danger.
And it's so funny. Just as I said that about Periscope, it started to act up. Periscope just loves us, by the way. So YouTube is running perfectly. Robin said. And Dennis Hochstetler is here. So that's good to see you, Dennis. Teresa says shalom. All right, we're going to jump right into things. We had a lot of stuff that's been going on. Carolyn Ridgway, good to see you. Blessings to you back. Bill, we had an attack from on the Saudi Arabia oil fields over the weekend, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that and get your thoughts on what you think about what is going on in Saudi Arabia. I Here's what I want to say first off. I don't think it's a coincidence really that all of a sudden we had this tanker, this Iranian tanker filled with oil that was released from Gibraltar, headed to Syria, and then all of a sudden, once it reaches Syria, we have this attack on the Saudi oil fields. Like, kind of, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, sorry, Brandon was trying to get this thing behind me fixed up. But anyway, for some time now, with this new government in Saudi Arabia, there have been these back channels establishing better relations with Israel. And if I know that, then the Iranians and all these other people know that too. And my suspicions are that even though there's never been any love lost between the Sunnis and the Shias, Iran and Saudi Arabia and the House of Saud and these things, I think that these overtures that the Saudi government has made toward Israel to have more peaceful relations is antagonizing to Iran, obviously, because they want Israel wiped off the face of the map, et cetera. So I think that's kind of in the background of what's going on. But I also go to a passage that's in the book of Daniel that I've always kind of sat on and wondered, when is this going to start happening? And what I'm alluding to is there's a passage where this person that we believe to be what the Bible calls the Antichrist is going to come into, it says, the fattest places of the province. But in Hebrew, it says he comes into the oily places of Medina. Of course, Medina is a very special place to Islam, and it's located in Saudi Arabia, and it's in these oil fields. It's in these places where the oil is at. So it's something that's very interesting to me for both the politics that's going on, behind the scenes, but also what prophecy has said, because politics is going to play a role in prophecy. So that's my initial take on it. Of course, the repercussions of that and how the United States, for instance, is posturing in response to all these things, it could lead to bigger things for certain.
Well, a lot of people are saying that they think that this, the attack is because of the sanctions that we put on Iran. And I want to show tweet number one of what President Trump said in regards to this. So get his opinion up there. I know Brandon has tweet number one. If Brandon is still with us.
Yeah, Brandon's still with us. He's pulling up tweet number one.
but I think it's important to know what the president is saying, and maybe get a. He says, remember when Iran shot down a drone saying knowingly what it was, that it was their airspace, when in fact it was nowhere close. They stuck strongly to that story, knowing that it was a very big lie. Now they say they had nothing to do with the attack on Saudi Arabia. We'll see. But in fact, we're hearing that the Houthis saying that they're the ones that are responsible. We're also hearing now that the Pentagon is saying, Mark Esper, the Pentagon chief, is saying that it looks like the rebels, in Houthi are the Houthi rebels are the ones in, I believe they're in Yemen, correct? That are taking responsibility for the strikes.
Well,
And
as far as where they were located geographically,
yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
but as far as the philosophy, that's going on inside of Islam, and particularly where Saudi Arabia is concerned. Now, as far as the sanctions, all right, maybe, but why Saudi Arabia? Why focus on Saudi Arabia if it's in fact the sanctions? And maybe you have an answer to that, But I don't know.
that doesn't make sense to me. See, what
Exactly.
makes it makes sense to me is what you were kind of alluding to, and said before, that Saudi Arabia is getting closer to the United States, and also getting closer, whether it's real or not, seemingly getting closer to Israel and becoming an ally, sort of, with Israel. And I don't think Iran likes that. And I think they're thinking, what can we do? And they get all of this oil that they were released in the tanker. They went to Saudi Arabia, and so it's like, okay, what can we do now to hurt Saudi Arabia? I know, we'll attack their oil fields, and then we'll have all these people out there who will be needing oil, and they'll have to buy it from us. That's how I see it.
I wouldn't be surprised. By the way, just a sidebar, and yet it's related to all this. I know some people who allegedly have information that the Saudi oil fields are not what they used to be,
Yeah.
and that the new leader of Saudi Arabia realizes that the longevity of this the Saudi government can't be dependent on oil, and it is actually realizing that they've got to kind of reconsider some things. This is why they're making overtures with Israel and actually looking at opening up Saudi Arabia, get this, to letting people establish churches, to be
Whoa.
more, yeah, exactly, to be more accepting of different views in that regard, so that it opens up the door to tourism, because the Israeli model, where tourism is concerned, is appealing, and this is what I'm told, to the head of the Saudi government for longevity's sake. So that, when you start looking at those kinds of things, and then they're making overtures toward Israel, at least through back channels, and then the Iran knows about this. Yeah, it makes sense to me that an attack on Saudi Arabia is, thumbing your nose at the United States in one way, but it actually has more to do with Saudi Arabia's posturing where Israel's concerned. That's what I think.
Yeah, I do too.
That's my opinion, but we'll have to wait and see what develops.
And if, let's say that comes through, what you're talking about, where Saudi Arabia opens up the country, allows Christians to have churches there, which it doesn't now, and starts becoming, really friendly, more friendly with Israel. What prophetically, if biblically, what is that? What does it talk about in the Bible that this is happening, or that this would be something that they would do? Can you think of any passages?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's some passages. I'll just kind of boil everything down. I mean, there's a lot of prophecies that speak to the fact that some of the Arab peoples are going to come into the belief that the God of Israel is God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, throughout the region, it's safe to say that the Bible is very clear that God sees many of these people that live in these Islamic nations as people He loves and cares about, not the religion that they've fastened themselves to, obviously, but the people themselves. And that there are many of these people that are in the last days going to become part of the family of faith, because they are, many of them anyway, are children of Abraham, genetically speaking. And they're going to come to faith. That's what the prophets say. And you and I have a mutual acquaintance who's written books about these kinds of things, Joel Richardson. And he's probably, as far as I know anyway, he's probably the go-to guy on this subject. But, again, there are a lot of places, and this is including Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, throughout the region, where many, many people are coming to faith. There are underground churches all over the region. So it seems to me that anytime there's been a large block of people who have been under an oppressive government, that God orchestrates events whereby that oppressive government collapses. Think about the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Iron Curtain, et cetera, to provide a window of opportunity for those people to, come to faith, or in some cases even go back to Israel, all of these different things. And so I'm kind of thinking that some of these developments here are, God's doing things behind the scenes, and the adversary, through the likes of the Iranian government and others, are responding to that. That's what I think. And so to answer your question, yeah, there are a lot of prophecies that speak to the issue that there are going to be, we'll use the modern terminology, Saudi Arabians, there are going to be Iraqis, there are going to be Iranians, there are going to be Syrians, there are going to be all of these different groups of people, a remnant, if you will, who are going to come to faith and to believe that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is truly God, and not this other God that they've been told is supreme. So we could talk all program about that.
Yeah.
But it is fascinating.
It's really good news. And it's really good news. I mean, it shows, that we're clearly, for me, is what it's saying to me, is that we're clearly in the end times, and we're getting closer and closer, however long that is, to God's return, but we're seeing things happen.
Well, let me just kind of tag this on to the end of it. And I am not the authority on this, mind you. I just know about some things. Mm-hmm. Many, many years ago, I met a couple by the name of Jim and Penny Caldwell. Make a very long story short, they worked in Saudi Arabia, decades ago, and they are the ones who first released pictures of this mountain in Saudi Arabia that people have come to believe is the actual Mount Sinai, not the one that's in the Sinai Peninsula that everybody goes to that doesn't even match the biblical description. And since then, many people have taken up the cause that this probably is the actual Mount Sinai, and Joel Richardson being one of them. In fact, Joel just recently went there along with another team, and they took a lot of footage of the area. So, but my point here is this. There is a movement inside the Saudi Arabian government to open that area up to tourists. That is, Christian tourists, Jewish tourists, because, again, going back to just the simple economics of the thing, the Saudi government realizes that for longevity's sake, they can't depend on oil, at least exclusively. And so these are the things that are happening. There's a political side to it, but it's the Creator's way of opening things up. And so what I was going to go to is this. Believe it or not, there is a prophecy in the book of Hosea where God talks about in the last days that he's going to bring his people back to that mountain. Whichever one it was, he's going to bring his people back to that mountain, and he's going to meet with them there. And that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up when you consider what's going on in the world today.
Wow. And that gives me a lot of hope, and that gets me excited. Now, Janet said, shalom from Colorado Springs. Renee said, get ready for the greater exodus. Amanda said, I've seen this documentary on the History Channel. Very cool. One of the documentaries that kind of explaining some of the things that I think you're talking about. Is anyone out there from Syracuse area or central New York State? Gordon wants to know.
Not me.
Not me. Not here. And Stephen a while ago said, Mount Sinai, before you started talking about that, he wanted to know, is that it? And I would say that right now with things that are happening, people want to there's a lot of talk about let's make sure we don't get sucked into this. That a lot of people feel like the deep state is trying to suck people in to this kind of the fight or argument, conflict, if you will, between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But how do we stay out of it? The president has already kind of said, that we're kind of ready for this and we're ready to move ahead and help you and help you with the oil. And in fact, he did. Brandon has tweet number two that this is another one from the president that I wanted to show. He said, because we have done so well with energy over the last few years, thank you, Mr. President. We are a net energy exporter and now the number one energy producer in the world. We don't need Middle Eastern oil and gas, and in fact have very few tankers there, but will help our allies. And we've already done that. He's tapped the reserves and said, if you need the reserves, go ahead, use them. I heard today that the oil prices have dropped 5%, not increased, dropped, as analysts believe that Saudi Arabia is going to be on the rebound sooner than what they even expected and be back up to what they were doing. They usually produce, I think it's 9.8 million barrels of oil a day. So that's pretty amazing.
Well, here's another component of what we've been talking about in the president's tweet, and that is that right now, anyway, the United States is not dependent on Middle Eastern oil, which that's not necessarily good for Saudi Arabia, and if you look at this long term, I mean, and they have to look at this long term. They realize that, well, we can't depend on keeping the United States on the hook, so to speak, to buy all of our oil. So that right there plays a significant component in it. Now, as far as being drawn into all of this and the offer to help our allies, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I don't want to see us get drawn into another conflict either. However, at the end of the day, we have to decide, what's right, what's wrong. And if we know something is right to do, not politically expedient, mind you, but right, that's what needs to be the determining factor. So we'll just have to see how things develop.
Yeah, and I think that we have a lot of people like Tulsi Gabbard coming out and telling the president, we're not your prostitutes and you're not our pimp. Honestly, when I mean those were not my words, those were hers. When they're talking about what's going on in Saudi Arabia and how we were saying we'll help you. It's funny how the Democrats and those on the far left don't want us to help unless it's their president, and then it would be expected that we would help our allies. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Wasn't it the previous president that bowed to the king of Saudi Arabia?
Yes.
Okay, anyway, just refreshing my memory there.
Definite bow, yes.
Okay.
Darlene said, I read that they're now fast-tracking approvals for drilling in the United States also. Yeah, we're like one of the number one producer of oil. I mean, can you imagine that we got to that place?
Well, and how quickly. Yes. Years ago, I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound like I know everybody, and I don't. It's just I've come in contact with people from time to time. But years ago, I met some people who were in the oil industry who said, to paraphrase, that the United States has more oil in the ground that's untapped, more so than any other nation on the face of the earth. Now, I can't verify that with any, report or anything like that. I'm just telling you what I was told by several people in the oil industry, that we have the natural resources to sustain this nation well into the future if we use them. Obviously, we want to do that wisely, but nevertheless, that the Creator gave us, this nation, the resources that we need to sustain what it is He wants us to do as a nation. So I commend the president for, allowing this nation to fend for itself, to feed itself, to provide for itself.
Yeah. Now, Gillian said, Joel Richardson said, Saudi Arabia, the real Sinai, is the wilderness where the women of Revelation will flee to.
Well, like I said, Joel is probably the go-to guy on this particular subject. He's been there. I haven't. We've talked, and like I said, Jim and Penny Caldwell were the ones who really, as far as I know anyway, first broke this whole thing to the world, many years ago, many years ago. So yeah, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt it. I'm convinced, you know. But as I said, I haven't been there. I'm just relying on the reports of some people that I know pretty well who have been there. I have been told that if I want to go, some people will try to make it happen. So we'll see. I'm thinking maybe let's let things get a little bit more
Stable.
less Wild West, you know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Darlene said Obama paralyzed that industry, makes you wonder why many people were out of work as a result. Tia said we were told that too in regards to what Gillian had said, I believe. Robin said we can't stay dependent on other countries for our resources. I'm glad we're drilling now. Kelly said they were making it so expensive, red tape, along with politicians giving our jobs away. And I mean, that's so true. That presidents in the past, as far back as I can remember, they never wanted us really to drill in the United States. And even today, when we start drilling, people are complaining because of fracking, that type of thing, and they say
Yeah.
it's causing earthquakes.
Well, the people who are complaining are not those people who would be without a job otherwise, for one.
Exactly.
But I say let's tap into our natural resources. That's I think in part that's why the Creator put them there. We need to be wise. We need to be careful. About how we do things. As with anything, we need to be wise. We need to appropriate these things properly, use them properly, but nonetheless use them. That's why these things are there. My goodness.
Yeah. Now Gillian said you should go. He says go, man. So he's saying you should go.
Well, like I said, I'm going to let things develop first. Besides that, I want to make sure I can come home to my wife and children.
Yeah. And it would be nice to one day when you go to Saudi Arabia that women are actually allowed to drive without a man in the car and they're not wearing, a headdress of certain.
Well,
Just saying.
that's starting to happen.
Yeah. Well, I know it's starting.
Right. I'm like I said, when it's a little less the Wild West, then I might consider going.
Now,
The
Hilda
Wild
said,
East,
why
I'm sorry.
Wild East? Why only women will go there during the tribulation? I don't know.
I think he's referring to what it says in Revelation chapter 12, when the woman who gives birth to the male child who's going to rule the nations with a rod of iron, she flees into the wilderness. The woman, the sun-clothed woman in Revelation 12, is metaphorically Israel. Okay, so that's what he was referring to.
Okay. Well, and speaking of Israel, we have
Yes.
elections today for Netanyahu. So
make sure I did that properly.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry. Let me do it that way.
I know. They're saying, I kind of looked a little while ago to kind of see how things were going because the polls close at 10 o'clock. It's about 6-ish, 7-ish, something there now. I'm not
They're
sure.
about 7 hours ahead, so
whatever time.
it's probably about 8:30, something like that.
Okay.
So getting close.
Getting close. At 6 o'clock, they said the turnout was 53.5%, which is up slightly from April when it was 52%. And there's been today is a national holiday and an election day is a national holiday to try to get people there. But and Elena said, crossing your fingers won't do it, Bill. So, I mean,
I know. I realize that. I understand. It was just, I'm
it was
cutting
just
up.
a human thing to do.
I was just cutting up.
But, people are saying, Darlene said polls it's for the election for Netanyahu because we had to do a re-election because he couldn't form a Knesset last time. So there's a lot of people who are saying that the blue and white party, there's a good chance that party may win out over him. That really scares me, to think about that and what Israel would be without Netanyahu. What would our deal of the century be? Would they go forward with a two-state solution if he doesn't win? Your thoughts on that?
Well, I've said many times that my opinion is, that Netanyahu is God appointed for this time. I'm not, the final word on that. I mean, his time may be up. I don't know. I guess as looking at it from our vantage point, Netanyahu just seems to be a very strong leader on the world scene. You know, domestically, I know that there are people, even believers, who don't particularly care for him for different reasons, particularly people who are of our faith, and they may have very good reason. But just looking at it in the scheme of politics in the world, you know, how he engages the Islamic world, and particularly those who want to see Israel wiped off the face of the earth, I just have always liked the way he handles himself in that regard. I go back to when he spoke at the UN here a few years ago, before President Trump took office, and how he very unabashedly addressed the terrorists who were in the room, and comparing that to the previous president who, in my view anyway, was very hesitant to address things directly where terrorism was concerned. He seemed to be passive about that. And so when I look at that, I see a leader, and that impresses me. And that's always good when we consider that Israel is our ally, our primary ally in that part of the world, if not the world. And then add to that the element of, you know, our faith, our belief, those of us who follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we understand all the promises that were given to Israel as it relates to the land, and some of the things that Netanyahu said that he would do and has done. So when I look at all of those kinds of things, you know, yeah, I'm pulling for him. You know, that's what I would like to see happen. But all these things are obviously in the hands of God. So we'll just have to see what happens and see what develops. I read that he was saying when he went to the polls this morning to vote that the race was very, very tight. I'm not surprised at that either. You know, Israel's it's a very unique place for many, many reasons, and including how people in the country respond to things. You know, you would think that people who are living every day of their life threatened with annihilation would want somebody who is, you know, very strong, who responds very boldly to threats and things like this. And yet, there are a lot of people in Israel who still think that we can have peace if we'll just give these people what they want. And I can't help but consider the irony of the fact that today these elections are taking place, and that is the question. How do we attain peace? How do we, as far as Israel's concerned, how do we continue to exist as a nation? Do we concede to the antagonists and the people who are aggressive, or do we stay strong and respond to them very strongly, etc.? And on the Hebrew calendar, not on our Gregorian calendar, mind you, but on the Hebrew calendar, today is the day that World War II began, when Germany invaded Poland. Now, why did Germany invade Poland? Because people in the West, Great Britain, others, were trying to appease Hitler, thinking that if they just give him what he wants, give him a little piece of land here and a little piece of land there, then somehow we can achieve peace. In fact, what did Neville Chamberlain come back and say? I believe we have achieved peace in our time. Well, it's just a couple of years later, September 1st, 1939, Germany's invading Poland, and then, of course, World War II is breaking out. The point is, today, the Israelis are going to the polls on the day, the anniversary of the day when World War II began. And the question, as far as I'm concerned, looking at it from my vantage point, is how do we go forward? Do we appease, or do we stand strong? Now, I realize that there's a lot of domestic issues, there's a lot of personal issues where Netanyahu is concerned that people have problems with, and you know, I can't speak to that. But I know I've rambled here a little bit, but the point is that I see someone like Netanyahu being the leader in these last days, but you know, God's going to have the last word on that. And oh, by the way, it's also Constitution Day. That's interesting too, to me.
Wow. Now, Linda said an article in Breaking Israel News references a prophecy that Netanyahu will be the last prime minister before Messiah establishes the Davidic kingdom. So,
well, you know, I don't know. Well, that's a one we'll have to wait and see. But
well, Well, and then others are asking, do you think this is, what happens here today will have some impact on what happens with President Trump? Like if Netanyahu loses, will President Trump lose? Is what they're asking.
Oh, was that, is that a forecast of what's going to happen next year here? I don't necessarily think so. I don't
We
think
run
that
parallel, but not everything has to be parallel.
Well, I don't think everything has to be parallel. No. I mean, it's going to be like the same for us. Do we want a strong leader? Do we want someone who's going to say what they mean what they say, follow through, get things done? Or do we want to go back to the passive, let's just all be friends and kumbaya and all those kinds of things, thinking that somehow or another, that if we just all agree to coexist, everything's going to be okay. We'll still have that choice, so we'll have to wait and see. I don't think that it's necessary, if Netanyahu loses the election, I don't think it's necessarily that the die is cast where the United States is. I think it's, we have choices to make, we have decisions to make, and it'll boil down to that.
I think it's interesting that that Netanyahu says that if elected, and he wanted to do this before the election,
right,
but that he wants to have Israeli sovereignty over the Jordan Valley.
Yeah.
And I know people see it as, oh, this is a sort of a move of desperation. He's trying everything he can to remain in power and to appease people. But I mean, do you think that's a bad thing? I don't. I don't.
I don't think it's a bad thing. Now, granted, I don't live in Israel. I don't have to deal with things that people deal with every day. And some Israelis, I would assume, might see that as an aggressive move, and they don't want to tick anybody off. They just, want to kind of go on about their business. But as it relates to what the Scripture has to say, the promises that were made to Abraham and to his seed, what the Bible has to say about the future, I think it's a good thing. I mean, look, I'm not talking about the average quote-unquote Palestinian that lives in the so-called West Bank. I'm not talking about the average Palestinian that lives in the Gaza Strip. I'm not talking about the man, woman, and child, but I am talking about the leadership in those areas. They're not going to be satisfied. No. The only thing they really respect is strength, and that's going back to what I was saying earlier, where Netanyahu is concerned. Now, granted, there might be somebody else the Creator has in mind that He's bringing on board to do certain things that we can't even imagine right now. So that's why I say everything's left in His hands. But just working with the information that we have as we understand things, the only thing that Abbas is going to respect is strength. The only thing that Hamas is going to respect is strength and determination and resiliency. And, boy, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but you remember back, back over here in the United States when Trump was campaigning, one of the things that he said is, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but this is pretty close, I think, if you hit me, I'm going to hit you back twice as hard.
Right.
All right. Now, as a believer, that's like, I don't know. But in real terms, when you're dealing with what Netanyahu and the Israelis have to deal with every day, if they hit you, you better hit them back twice as hard, because that's really the only thing that these Islamic radicals and the leadership like Abbas and the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah, that's the only thing they truly respect.
Yeah, that's true. And President Trump understands that. And while the other people like Robert Francis and O'Rourke and other people maybe not get that, there's another aspect of it too today on the election, and that is we have photo number 2, the voting. They're claiming there's been a lot of voter fraud, and there was voter fraud in the last election. And they're calling it the Arab voter fraud specifically. They said it was rampant in Israel's April elections, and they said there were something like 82 complaints that were filed, but nobody did anything about it. Nobody went to look and investigate. It kind of sounds similar, to what we know in America we feel pretty strongly is going on in our country. And it seems like a lot of people aren't looking into that as well.
Now that is an interesting parallel. Look, I think as long as there have been elections, there's been, voter fraud. I mean, that's Unfortunately,
hand in
the name,
hand.
yeah, it kind of goes hand in hand. That's just the way it is, and you try to, hopefully, people try to suppress that as much as possible and weed it out. But it is what it is, and you know, and people are going to do what they can get away with. And so, if you're not going to look into it, if you're not going to try to govern that and weed it out, then yeah, people are going to do it. I mean, that's Israel. That's here, Russia. You know. There are people who want power, and they will do whatever, and they will align themselves with whoever in order to attain power.
Well, I'd like to show a video that we have, video 1, on the Palestinians' view on the Israeli elections. So I'd like to roll that and see what they think about the elections and what's going to come out of that today.
Israel's parliamentary elections are just hours away, and many Palestinians are worried about the outcome.
There is a real concern among the Palestinians about the elections and the fear that this government, especially under Netanyahu's leadership, is ready to go to the extreme in order to stay in power. Many decisions concerning the daily life, the political future, and the future of the dream of a Palestinian state will be taken in these elections.
Many believe the results of Tuesday's vote will have a direct and major impact on their future.
The Israeli election may have very serious repercussions, especially if right-wing forces in Israel dominate and try to overlook the Palestinian issue and a peaceful resolution.
With the peace process frozen and Prime Minister Netanyahu's campaign promise to annex the West Bank's Jordan Valley looming large, many Palestinians say they have little hope their national aspirations will be realized.
If Netanyahu goes away, it will have a direct impact on the region and the Palestinian issue in particular. Not a radical one, but at least it will change the course and the way of dealing.
A recent poll conducted by the Jerusalem Media and Communication Center found that more than 40% of Palestinians believe the impact of the Israeli elections will be negative to their cause.
Realistically speaking, the Palestinian street is not interested in the Israeli elections. In Israel, when it comes to the Palestinian issue, on the right or on the left, there is no difference.
Palestinians want to establish their own state with East Jerusalem as its capital in territories captured by Israel in 1967. But many say that Israeli politicians on both the left and the right, as well as the Israeli public, don't seem to have the issue on their agenda.
Kind of a different viewpoint, and there's one more viewpoint I want to talk about, and that is Ilhan Omar's viewpoint. Sounds pretty similar.
Must we? Okay. Okay.
Sounds pretty similar to what the Palestinians are thinking. If we have tweet number 3 on Ilhan Omar's opinion, she said Netanyahu's existence as the leader of Israel has diminished any hope for a two-state solution, and we can't be expected to be silent about that.
Well, let's see. If Ilhan's against it, I'm for it.
Absolutely.
If Ilhan's for it, I'm against it.
Well, let's show, and I apologize ahead of time. Let's show video number 2 of Ilhan Omar, and that'll be the last of her for today, hopefully. So.
Okay.
Who were specifically banned by the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, from visiting that country. He faces a very tough election in the next few days. If he doesn't win, are you going to try to go back, and do you stand by your call for a boycott of Israel?
I certainly hope that the people of Israel make a different decision. And my hope is that they recognize that his existence, his policies, his rhetoric really is contradictory to the peace that we are all hoping that that region receives and receives soon. Just right now, if you look at the annexation that's taking place, for many of us in Congress, there has been a long-standing support for a two-state solution. And this annexation now is going to make sure that that peace process does not happen, and we will not get to a two-state solution. I think what is really important is for people to understand that you have to give people the opportunity to seek the kind of justice they want in a peaceful way. And I think the opportunity to boycott, divest, sanction is the kind of pressure that leads to that peaceful process.
Well, you know, I was just, as I was listening to that, I wasn't aware that there was a war going on in Israel right now, where Israel was actively engaged in a war. And in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that, yes, I understand that there is this ongoing disconnect between, quote unquote, the Palestinians and Israel. I understand that. But there seems, it's relatively peaceful in Israel. You understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah.
There's not a conventional war going on right now. They're not at war with Jordan. They're not actively at war with Syria. They're not actively at war with Iraq. And I understand that there's skirmishes here and there, and they're always on high alert. I get that. But what I'm saying is, Israel has managed to live in relative peace, mind you know, if you will, because of strength. Because of being strong. You know, Reagan used to say, peace through strength. He also used to say, trust but verify, you know? So the point here is that Ilhan Omar and Mahmoud Abbas and some of these other people who are wanting their justice, well, what is their justice? Historically, their sense of justice is no Israel. And they will use the peace process to get a piece of the land and another piece of the land and another piece of the land until they have the upper hand. And then, based on what we see historically, their agenda is to wipe Israel off the face of the map. I mean, Ilhan Omar, when she was wanting to go to Israel, didn't even recognize it as Israel. She applied to go to Palestine, her and Rashida Tlaib and, you know, these people. So, you know, this is the mask that, according to the Bible, the Antichrist wears as he tries to solidify his power. And by the way, I'm not calling Ilhan Omar the Antichrist. I believe Ilhan Omar and her ilk are working in the spirit of Antichrist. Okay, but this is the mask he wears. This is the mask the spirit of Antichrist wears. We want peace, we want harmony, we want coexistence. No, they don't. They want another piece and another piece until they get the upper hand so that they can destroy Israel. And by the way, it doesn't stop with Israel. It also includes you and me and this country, because this country was founded upon Judeo-Christian values. It was founded upon what the Gospels said. It was founded upon what Moses wrote, what the prophets declared. And they want to eradicate that from the face of the earth. That's what's going on here. Mm-hmm. And for her and her kind to, you know, be given the platform that they are given right now, it tests my sanctification. So,
yeah, I mean, Shalom says Omar's cause is for her own personal agenda, not the USA's best. Robin said, I pray against her. God, hear our prayers. She hates Israel and America. Emily Stanton says his existence, is she planning on harming him? Yeah, that was a really bold statement about his existence. That was a really strange thing to say. Amy said her cause is to divide, not unite. Renee said no two-state solution. Omar said that, let's see. Omar said that as if there was ever been anything different among the Palestinian mindset. Bethany said, consider this parallel. Former U.S. administration didn't support Israel against those invading her borders and taking Israeli land to form another country. How soon will those violating our borders demand their own country on American soil?
Well, they've already done that, by the way, but that's a different topic.
Now, Amy said, agree is not to settle, but to assert. She is part of the Antichrist system, Renee said. They will not agree on one point, and she did not acknowledge that point. They have said they will not recognize Israel's right to exist, and that has stopped all two-state solutions, Darlene Dine reminded us of. And their peace means P-I-E-C-E, Tammy said. And Joe R. said, what about the she used in conjunction with the Antichrist and Revelation bill?
Okay.
I think that may be what you explained earlier about she being Israel,
Well, no,
Revelation 12.
no, I think he's referring to something else there. But
okay.
Right now, my mind just went blank on the particular reference in Daniel. But so I don't know. We'll have to come back to that.
He said Revelation, so I don't know. That's
he said
why
Revelation?
I thought he was
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, reread the comment. I'm sorry. I heard something.
Oh, that's okay. He said, what about the she used in conjunction with the Antichrist in Revelation?
Okay, well, find that reference and put it back up in a comment so I'll know exactly what you're talking about, because I'm drawing a blank right now.
Yeah. Okay. And it doesn't, it's okay. It's sad that the world feels that they should have a say in it. And Joe R. said the original Greek is what referring to a minute ago. So
okay, well, I don't
maybe
know.
you could go back and read the comments later.
Read that later. Yeah.
But yeah, I think with Israel, as we've been talking about, nothing is ever going to stop about the hatred towards Israel that the, quote, Palestinian people have, and those people that are in our Congress that seem not to like Israel, and they can pretend that it's, oh, well, I'm just, free speech. But it's always totally against Israel. Now, Kelly said, I pray Israel gets all the land promised to Father Abraham. So whatever Abraham
they will.
was promised to him.
In time, they will.
In time, they will.
It just might be when the Messiah is here, but they will.
And Linda Queen says to Bethany, it's already happening in Minnesota, what she was talking about with the borders. And Jim and Linda, it's late, and said, Shalom, I'm sorry I'm late. But you can catch the replay on that.
You just missed 4 of the 5 great mysteries of the universe, Jim. But,
exactly.
Besides that, sorry.
Besides that. All right, now I want to go on to another topic, one that, is really not mentioned in the mainstream media. And so those are some of the topics I like to bring to the show, because I want people to understand what's going on. The Clarion Project is a watchdog group. We don't hear a lot from them as much as we used to, and that's a shame. They're uncovering some things that China, Russia, and other foreign nations are giving a whole lot of money to our colleges and universities. From 2012, I believe they found that the universities from all these foreign entities have been given a total of $10 billion. That should scare everybody, hearing that.
Well, I mean, yeah, it should. It should anger us, but it also kind of helps you understand some things. Makes things a little...
it puts it into perspective.
Yeah, puts it into perspective. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah. I mean, I may get in trouble with some, but there's very, very few universities that I would ever, or colleges that I would ever think of allowing my children to go to at this point, because of what they're turning out. I know some, and I'm getting off subject just a tad, but it's connected in my mind. There was a Tennessee state senator or state congressman here recently that made the statement that we need to cut off all the federal funds to all these universities, because they're just churning out all these liberals and all this, these progressives and all these kinds of things. And of course, he was, castigated because how dare he come against higher education? He just wants everybody to stay barefoot and hillbillies and all that. Of course, obviously, that's not what he was saying. But the point is that kind of goes hand in hand, in my mind, with what you're saying here. You've got all of these foreign entities who have different interests than the average American's going to have, pouring money into these universities. So who are these universities going to cater to? They're going to cater to you and me and what we believe, or are they going to cater to foreign interests? Now, biblically speaking, this kind of thing is exactly what Moses said would happen to that nation that abandoned their relationship with God. The things that God had given them that were intended to be a blessing those would be the very things that would turn into a curse. And on the topic of higher education, what is supposed to be a blessing, has been a blessing in times past, is in fact becoming a curse to this nation because of what it is turning out into the streets, into the workplace, into government, and the mindset they have, the philosophies they hold to, and the things that they're trying to advance. It has become just exactly what Moses said it would be.
Well, and you also think about it too, and this should scare people when we talk about the one world government that the Bible talks about eventually coming into. You part of what may bring people to that and kind of have them connected together is climate change. We hear a lot about climate change, and that is, well, this is something that the entire world can get behind. And if you have people who know that, and people who like Qatar, or Qatar, whichever one that you want to say, and Russia, and all these other people that are giving money to that, that they're pushing climate change. They're pushing those things that can control what you eat, control what you do, how you dress, how you live, all of that. And we're spending like millions and millions of dollars. Georgetown University is one of them, where the Qatar gave money to. 28 universities got $1.4 billion. And nobody, as a parent who's sending your child out there to the universities, not only now are you looking at ideologies and whatever else outside of the United States coming from these foreign countries.
You froze up just for a second. We got the gist of what you said, but anyway, going back to the point. Based on that, and again, I'm connecting this in my mind. I hope it connects with everybody listening. Do you remember some of the things that these Democratic candidates were talking about that they want to ban in order to determine what you eat, what you don't have available to eat, and all these other things? Every aspect of your daily life. It kind of makes me wonder, are these same people funding these campaigns? Are they putting money in their pocket as well to push this agenda? Is that why they're saying all these things? And all of them saying basically the same thing. They want to ban everything. They want to be in complete control of every aspect of your life. Where is that influence coming from? Is it just something they conceived in of themselves? I doubt that, seeing that most all of them are saying the very same thing. Makes you wonder.
Right. And it's part of the 2030 agenda that the UN is pushing, and it is to control every single thing based upon climate change. And you have to know that these people coming from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and all these other places that support the UN, that's why they have the same agenda. That's why they are saying the same things, and that's where all this is headed. And you have to ask yourself as a parent, should my child be going to these universities? How do I find out that money is coming? You may not be able to find out as a parent that these foreign entities are putting money into these colleges. This is not going to be something that they readily tell you.
Of course not.
So,
they're not going to. The adversary is not going to want you to see the evil part of that tree. He only wants you to see the good part. So you'll take the bait and eat the poison.
Now, Amy said, I have seen people on fire going to local Christian colleges, and they come out with a more diluted mindset. Bethany said, Allison said most colleges were originally started to teach people in the ministry of sharing the gospel. Wow, have we gotten far away from that? Amy said, I agree that to get a good paying job, a person needs a 4-year degree. However, it makes me wonder what the goal is. I look at the Amish Mennonite people, and they are some of the most knowledgeable people in the areas useful in daily life. Maybe our goals have been mingled seed. But, also, you don't have to go to a 4-year college. I mean, that's a kind of something I think was started by maybe the progressives a long time ago. People make good money doing other things. Not everybody needs a degree from college. And so I think that's a farce.
I do too. And I say that with all due respect to Amy. I'm all for education. I'm all for doing everything you can to kind of get a leg up so you can forge a career and have a good life the best you can. But I don't think it's dependent on whether you go to college or not. I mean, I know a lot of people with college degrees who aren't using that college degree. They spend all this money on a college degree they're not even using, and they're having to go into some other field. I didn't go to college. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I've succeeded or what have you. I'm just saying that I didn't go to college, and I don't regret it one iota. So I think that's something that, depending on the field, but what is it going to cost you, not just in terms of money, but what is it going to cost you? Or as a parent, what is it going to do to your son or your daughter to put them in this college to get a degree in, I don't know, engineering, or some kind of math or something? What is it costing really in terms of eternal values? What is happening to the mind of your son and daughter when you turn them over to these people, trusting that this is the way to go, this is how we're supposed to do things? That's just the way it's done if they're going to succeed in the world. Really? Is that what it is? Going back to something Allison said, and thank you, sweetie, for making that comment. Many of these universities, Harvard University, for instance, the reason it was started, it wasn't to be, it wasn't just reading, writing, and arithmetic. It was to teach scripture. In fact, one of the things that Harvard was known for early in the day was not only teaching scripture, but teaching the Hebrew language so that people could better understand the scripture. At one point in time, in Hebrew, there was something written there on the Student Union building in Hebrew, taken from the scripture. So how far we have, moved away from that is why I don't believe that going to college is the avenue that people should be taking necessarily, unless they're okay with their son or daughter coming out a Marxist, a socialist, an atheist, and not that that happens to everyone. I get it. I understand. But it's a very good chance they're going to be heavily indoctrinated with that kind of stuff.
Now, Dawn made Rose Day pretty good question. Did the new Green Deal really come from the UN and not from AOC? And you have to wonder how much they're working together. That the squad, and I have another name for them I won't say again, but the squad, how much it came from the UN and the ideology. If nothing else, they certainly believe it. Now, Jim said, kick the UN out of New York City, turn the building into a big old VA hospital. Linda said, it's hard to wait for the time God steps into this mess. Be not discouraged, family. If they can push climate change here and again stop our oil and gas, who benefits follow the money, Kelly said. Trade school is so much better. You can earn money while you're leaning. And Belinda's asking for prayers with her 22-year-old daughter, husband's 22-year-old daughter. It's going to college and all that.
Yeah.
So, trade school, there are a lot of people who do very well without a college education.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly what it said, and maybe I shouldn't, but there was what do you call these things? These memes? Is that the right word? Memes, they have these pictures, with these little sayings. And it shows this guy, he looks like he's, the typical Antifa participant, and he's got the slouchy look, and he's got the long hair and the beard, and and the clothes that are just slouchy and everything. And he's on his computer, and he's got all his little devices, and he's he's run up all this student debt, and he's complaining about not having a good job and all this kind of stuff. And then below that, it shows a guy who didn't go to college. He went to a trade school. He learned it. He was making $80,000 a month, and he's on he's working for the electric company, and he's about to turn off the other guy's power for non-payment. I'm sorry. I just thought that was hilarious. I wish I could remember exactly what it said, but you get the idea.
I get the idea.
There's a lot of people who are going to school and they're going to college, but for what?
Yeah.
To do what?
Now, Shannon said, if we train our children in the ways of the Lord, they will return it no matter what is taught. Too much testimony on behalf of the giants in the land. Princeton's motto was, cursed are the schools who don't point to Christ. Boy, that's changed a lot, I guess. That was Allison's comment also, Bethany said. He said no harm taken, but I think you may have not understood that fully. Jobs both my husband and I have had in the past now will not get hired.
No,
not get-
I understood. I mean,
Yeah.
I understood that there are some vocations that you have to have a degree. I get that, totally get it. What I'm saying is, at what cost at this point in time?
Yes.
What is it costing?
Absolutely.
You know, in eternal value. So you get a good job. You have a high-paying job because you have a degree. What is it costing you in terms of what is eternal?
Right.
With so many of these, universities and colleges being filled with faculty who are atheists, who are communists, who are Marxists, who are this and that and the other, and they're indoctrinating these kids coming out, and they don't believe in anything. That's what I'm getting at. Is that 4-year degree worth that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, I want to move on to another subject really quickly while we're near the end of our show. If we have tweet number 4, Brandon, this is once again, the left is continuing to investigate President Trump. And they talked about it the other day. He tweeted back, I have a better idea. Look at the Obama book deal or the ridiculous Netflix deal. Then look at all the deals made by the Dems in Congress, the Congressional Slush Fund, and lastly, the IG reports. Take a look at them. Those investigations would be over fast. And we just had yesterday where the New York prosecutors, the Southern District of New York, are coming out and asking for the last 8 years of President Trump's tax returns.
Yeah, well,
to have one more thing to go after him for.
It's endless with some of these people. I mean, the whole Kavanaugh thing being ramped up again and based on nonsense, and then the Nadler still going on with this whole impeach Trump thing and all, this New York AG pulling up these, wanting to get Trump's tax returns. That's all they do at this point in time. That's all they're about. And yet at the same time, just like the president mentioned, all these other things are being ignored, overlooked, conveniently so. And I think we know why, or we can speculate as to why.
We absolutely know. Yeah. And I think with Kavanaugh, I think the reason that came up, and it's already been debunked,
Right.
but then you have people like Kamala Harris, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, all these people coming out and saying, and Ayanna Presley. Let's go out and let's impeach. Let's do an inquiry. The thing now is, the buzzword is, let's do an inquiry to impeach the president. Let's do an inquiry to impeach Kavanaugh, and they're trying to connect him back to President Trump. Oh, this guy was, he sexually assaulted women, and so did President Trump. I mean, you can see them trying the hardest they can to bring this together, to make something out of nothing. And even Newsweek, I felt almost sorry for them today, that they had this story of a 79-year-old woman who was supposedly in some way connected and related to Trump, that she basically said, I don't like that young man because he used to steal pancakes. Probably, we know, when he was 5. And so I'm just thinking, I almost felt sorry for them. It was just like so desperate.
Okay, I have a confession to make. When I was like 7, I stole a Tootsie Roll.
You're never going to be president. What can I say?
I know. I mean, I went back and told him I stole the Tootsie Roll and paid for it. But I did do that. So anyway, it's gotten absolutely ridiculous.
Well, Tootsie Roll, then, something else later on. It's
hey, let me interrupt just a moment. I think Brandon found that I was talking about. I know that we're running short on time, but put this up there because this is hilarious.
Oh my gosh!
Don't be like Jim. I'm sorry.
See how Bill spends his time when he's not on the show.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. I appreciate it. All right.
And it's like Dawn said with the Newsweek, it's Pancake Gate now. We have something new to go after the president. So,
it is the adversary through these people.
It is.
Who is agitated because of some things that have happened. And I think some of those things that have happened are things that God has orchestrated, that he's used this man to do, naming, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, supporting Netanyahu and Israel's decision to annex the Golan and consider it to be part of Israel, as it should be. Things like this. The adversary is ticked. And so anything and everything is being thrown at the guy, and anybody that would, for instance, Kavanaugh, anybody that would be instrumental, potentially anyway, in certain cases that are going to right some wrongs that have been going on in this country. And it makes me wonder, Susan, if how things are going with RGB right now, that they're getting back into this Kavanaugh thing. So, just there's the adversary and the powers of darkness are upset.
And I think we look at them sometimes and we just think, my gosh, how could anybody believe this? This is so crazy what we're hearing. I think the crazier it gets and the more we think things are crazy, the more we know that this is a total spiritual battle that the enemy is absolutely saying, I want to try to destroy, even, with being as ridiculous as it is.
Well, I've said this several times now, but I want to say it again. I am convinced that Donald Trump is to progressives and the leftists and the Marxists and the socialists and the communists, he is to them what Jerusalem is to the nations. God uses Jerusalem to be a stumbling block for the nations. I think he's using Donald Trump in much the same way. And I want to clarify that does not make Donald Trump necessarily to be a man of God, but it is to say that he is God's man for this time in order to serve God's purposes. And we're seeing things being exposed for what they truly are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're buckle up. We have a lot more to go on what we're going to be seeing and what's going to be coming out, and whether anybody's ever indicted, convicted, or anything else. I mean, we are seeing evil bubbling to the top, and we have been for a long time. So, but anyway, I wanted to thank everybody. Thank you today for your comments, for your questions. And Scarlett said, Brandon, thanks for the humor. And so thank you, everybody, for being here.
No problem.
And until next week, we will see you again. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Take care.
Shalom.